They said it couldn't be done. A landlocked nation under siege, led by a military government, building its way out of dependence while the world watched with skepticism. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré wasn't asking for permission. He turned rotting tomatoes into factories, paved highways that broke trade monopolies, lit up villages the grid abandoned. 3 projects, 1 ruthless vision, sovereignty or nothing. And now, as 300,000 people power their lives with the sun, as farmers bypass foreign middlemen, as processed goods stay local, the entire Sahel is taking notes. Because if Burkina Faso can rewrite the rules, what's stopping the rest? This is how revolutions actually look. 1. Red gold. The tomatoes were rotting. Tons of them, spread across the dry earth of Burkina Faso like forgotten treasure. Ripe, red, and worthless. Farmers watched their harvest spoil under the Sahel sun, while supermarket shelves across West Africa stocked imported tomato paste from Europe and China. It was the paradox of dependence. A nation rich in produce, starving for processed goods. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré wasn't about to let that slide. He saw what others ignored, that food sovereignty isn't just about growing crops, it's about controlling what happens to them after. And so Red Gold was born. Not as charity, not as aid, but as a declaration. Burkina Faso would no longer export its raw wealth and import its own processed future. $8 million. That's what it took to flip the script. The Red Gold processing plant didn't just rise from the ground, it rewired the entire value chain. Suddenly, those rotting tomatoes had a destination. They weren't waste anymore. They were currency. They were jobs. They were dignity. Over 150 direct positions emerged overnight, from line workers to quality control specialists, engineers to logistics managers. And that was just the beginning. For every job inside the factory, 2 more rippled outward: truck drivers hauling produce, packaging suppliers scaling up production, traders negotiating new contracts. This wasn't just a factory. It was an ecosystem reboot. The timing couldn't be more brutal or more necessary. Across the Sahel, food insecurity is a weapon. Groups like JNIM and ISIS West Africa have exploited hunger to recruit, to destabilize, to fracture communities. Traoré knows this. He's been fighting them in the trenches. But he also knows you can't shoot your way out of dependency. You have to build your way out. Red Gold is part of that architecture. It's economic insurgency against the colonial reflex that kept Africa supplying raw materials while buying back finished products at markup. Tomato paste might sound mundane, but in a region where imported goods dominate and local industries have been hollowed out for decades, it's a middle finger to the old order. And the farmers? They're feeling it. For years, they gambled every season. Planting, watering, praying, only to watch prices crater when middlemen flooded markets or when imports undercut them. Now there's a buyer, consistent one, a local one. Red Gold absorbs their harvest, processes it, packages it, and sells it back into the national grid. It's a closed loop, a sovereignty loop, the kind of thing Traoré's allies in Mali and Niger are watching closely, because if Burkina Faso can do this with tomatoes, what's next? Cashews? Cotton? Shea butter? But let's be real, this isn't without tension. Western critics call it nationalist rhetoric. Some regional economists warn about quality control, market saturation, and the risk of state-backed ventures collapsing under mismanagement. Fair. But here's the counter. Burkina Faso tried the other way. Decades of it. Structural adjustment, market liberalization, foreign investment with strings attached. And where did it lead? To a nation exporting raw gold while importing basic food staples. To a generation of young men with no jobs and no hope, easy prey for extremist recruiters. Traoré looked at that equation and said enough. Red Gold is the alternative. What no one expected was how fast it would scale. The plant is already operating near capacity, and there's talk of expansion, new lines, new products, new partnerships with regional buyers. Imagine a West African tomato paste supply chain that doesn't route through Rotterdam or Shanghai. Imagine the capital staying local, the jobs staying local, the pride staying local. That's the vision. And it's not just about tomatoes anymore. It's about proving a model. proving that a military government born out of frustration and coup can deliver tangible, everyday wins for ordinary people. Is this the blueprint for the Sahel's next chapter? Or just a flash in the pan before global markets crush the dream? Drop your take, because if this works, the whole region's playbook just changed. 2. Corridor of Sovereignty roads. They paved a road. But this wasn't just asphalt and stone. This was a middle finger to every colonial trade route still squeezing West Africa's throat. $120 million. Bobo Dioulasso to the Ivory Coast border. A highway that doesn't just connect cities. It rewrites who controls the flow of goods, the direction of wealth, and the future of a landlocked nation that's been choking on dependency for too long. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't just approve this project. He weaponized it, because in the Sahel, infrastructure isn't neutral. It's power, and whoever controls the roads controls the game. For decades, Burkina Faso's farmers have been trapped in a cruel lottery. Grow your crops, load them onto battered trucks, and pray they survive the journey through potholed nightmares that turn trade into gambling. By the time mangoes, cashews, or livestock reach the coast, half the profit's been swallowed by delays, bribes, and breakdowns. Meanwhile, foreign companies operating through Abidjan and other port cities set the terms, the prices, the timelines. Burkina Faso was producing the wealth but watching middlemen and coastal elites pocket the margins. Traoré looked at that equation and said no more. The Corridor of Sovereignty was born not as a dream but as a doctrine. This highway is strategic in ways that go beyond economics. Bobo Dioulasso is Burkina Faso's second-largest city and its agricultural heartland. Connecting it directly to Ivory Coast's trade infrastructure means farmers can now bypass the old, exploitative networks. They can move goods faster, cheaper, and with more control over pricing. It's a supply chain revolution disguised as a construction project. And it's already rattling cages. Regional traders who've profited off Burkina Faso's isolation are watching their leverage evaporate. Foreign logistics firms that monopolized cross-border transport are suddenly competing with local operators who know the terrain and speak the language. But here's where it gets deeper. This road isn't just about tomatoes and cashews. It's about geopolitical leverage. Burkina Faso is landlocked, hemmed in by neighbors with their own agendas. Every export, every import, every ounce of trade has to pass through someone else's territory. That's vulnerability. That's dependence. And Traoré's government knows it. By building this corridor, they're diversifying access points, reducing reliance on any single route, and ensuring that if tensions flare with one neighbor, the economy doesn't collapse. It's sovereignty engineering. And it's the kind of long-term thinking that makes Western analysts nervous and regional partners take notice. The alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has been watching this unfold with intense interest. If one corridor works, why not 3? Why not a network of sovereign highways cutting across the region, linking markets, bypassing colonial-era port monopolies, and creating a new trade architecture that doesn't route through Paris or depend on French-controlled infrastructure? You'll see why this matters, because every meter of this highway is a bet that Africa can build its own future without permission slips from former colonizers. Is this the infrastructure revolution the Sahel's been waiting for? Or just a road that leads to more debt and broken promises? Drop your take, because the implications are already spreading. Critics will point to the price tag. $120 million in a country fighting jihadist insurgencies and managing a fragile post-coup economy. They'll ask if this is fiscal responsibility or nationalist theater. But Traoré's calculus is different. He's betting that economic independence funds itself. That every truck rolling smoother, every farmer getting better margins, every job created along the route feeds back into national stability. That you can't fight extremism with bullets alone. You need roads, jobs, and dignity. And if that means taking on debt now to break free from structural dependence later, so be it. The highway's already under construction. Equipment's moving. Contracts are signed. And across the region, leaders are doing the math. 3. Yelen solar energy. The lights came on. And for the first time in generations, the darkness didn't win. Over 150 villages across Burkina Faso, places the grid forgot, places the world ignored, suddenly had power. Not from diesel generators choking the air with fumes. Not from foreign energy companies extracting profits while communities sat in the dark. But from the sun. From Yelen. 300,000 people who used to navigate their nights by kerosene lamps and firelight now have electricity humming through their homes, their schools, their clinics. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a pilot program with a feel-good press release. This was Captain Ibrahim Traoré betting that energy independence starts at the village level, and that sovereignty glows brightest when it's decentralized. Here's what no one tells you about electrification in the Sahel. It's not just about convenience. It's about survival. Without power, rural clinics can't refrigerate vaccines. Without power, schools can't extend evening classes for kids who spend their days working in fields. Without power, small businesses can't compete, entrepreneurs can't scale, and entire communities get locked into subsistence cycles that make them vulnerable to poverty, to extremism, to despair. Traoré's government looked at that reality and understood something fundamental. You can't fight jihadist recruitment with slogans. You fight it with opportunity, with light, with the hum of a solar panel charging a phone, running a grain mill, keeping a pharmacy stocked with life-saving medicine. Yelen isn't just infrastructure. It's insurgency against the old energy cartel. For decades, West Africa's rural areas have been afterthoughts in national energy plans. Too remote, too expensive, too unprofitable. So they stayed off the grid while cities soaked up subsidized electricity and foreign corporations negotiated sweetheart deals for fossil fuel imports. But solar doesn't play by those rules. It's modular, it's scalable. It doesn't need transmission lines stretching hundreds of kilometers or billion-dollar power plants that take decades to build. You drop a mini-grid in a village, train locals to maintain it, and suddenly that community has agency. Suddenly, they're not waiting for Ouagadougou to remember they exist. Is this the energy model that breaks Africa's dependence on fossil fuel imports? Or just a drop in the bucket before the old systems reassert control? Drop your take, because the ripple effects are already hitting. The job creation alone rewrites the script. Installing solar panels, maintaining mini-grids, managing energy distribution, these aren't abstract tech jobs requiring degrees from European universities. They're local, hands-on positions that pull young men and women into the formal economy. Every village with a Yelen installation becomes a training ground. Every technician trained becomes a node in a growing network of energy expertise that doesn't rely on foreign contractors. And that matters, because when your energy system is run by outsiders, you're always one diplomatic spat away from blackouts. When it's run by locals, it's yours. But let's zoom out. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Across the alliance of Sahel states, there's a quiet revolution brewing around self-sufficiency. Mali's exploring lithium deposits for battery production. Niger's sitting on uranium reserves but seeing minimal domestic benefit. Burkina Faso's going solar. These aren't isolated initiatives. They're pieces of a larger puzzle, a regional strategy to decouple from neocolonial extraction models and build integrated, sovereign supply chains. Yelen is the proof of concept. If Burkina Faso can light up 150 villages without foreign energy giants calling the shots, what's stopping the rest of the Sahel from following suit? And here's the kicker: renewable energy isn't just clean. It's strategic. Fossil fuels tie nations to volatile global markets, to import dependency, to currency fluctuations that can wreck budgets overnight. Solar panels don't have those strings. Once they're installed, the sun shows up every day. No invoices, no negotiations, no leverage for foreign powers to exploit. That's the sovereignty play. For combined impact and strategic vision, they built a system. Not overnight. Not with donor applause or World Bank blueprints. But piece by piece, project by project, Captain Ibrahim Traoré's Burkina Faso constructed something the Sahel hasn't seen in decades. A working model of sovereignty that doesn't beg permission from Brussels or Washington. Red gold turned rotting tomatoes into processed goods and jobs. The corridor of sovereignty paved a highway that rewrote trade routes and broke middleman monopolies. Yelen lit up 150 villages with solar power, proving energy independence isn't a fantasy for landlocked nations. Separately, these are impressive wins. Together, they're a blueprint. And across West Africa, leaders are watching. some with hope, others with dread. Because if this works, the entire regional playbook just became obsolete. Here's the thing about sovereignty. It's not a speech. It's not a slogan painted on a wall. It's infrastructure. It's processed goods staying local instead of being shipped abroad and re-imported at markup. It's roads that farmers control, not foreign logistics firms. It's electricity generated from the sun, not diesel bought on volatile global markets. Traore's government understood this from day one. You can't declare independence and then keep running the same colonial-era systems that kept you dependent. You have to rebuild from the ground up. And that's exactly what's happening. The genius is in the integration. Red gold doesn't exist in isolation. Those tomatoes being processed into paste, they're transported faster and cheaper now because the Bobo Dioulasso highway cuts travel time and costs. The factories processing them, powered increasingly by renewable energy from initiatives like Yelen, reducing operational costs and carbon footprints simultaneously. The jobs created across all three projects, they're pulling young people into formal economic activity, giving them stakes in the system, making them less vulnerable to extremist recruitment. This isn't just policy, it's ecosystem design. And it's working in ways that traditional development models, the ones obsessed with foreign investment and structural adjustment, never could. Is this the beginning of a new Sahel renaissance? Or are we watching a fragile house of cards that collapses under its own ambition? Drop your take, because the stakes just went continental. The broader implications are seismic. For decades, West African development has followed a script written elsewhere. International NGOs parachute in with solutions designed in air-conditioned offices thousands of miles away. Loans come with conditions that gut local industries. Aid arrives with strings that tie governments to donor priorities instead of national needs. Burkina Faso is flipping that script. These projects are locally conceived, locally executed, and locally owned. The capital might include international partnerships, but the vision is homegrown. And that distinction matters, because ownership breeds resilience. When communities see tangible benefits, jobs, electricity, better roads, they defend those gains. They become invested stakeholders, not passive recipients. But let's not romanticize this. Traore's government is navigating brutal terrain. Jihadist insurgencies still control swaths of territory. Economic pressures are real. The international community remains skeptical of military-led governments, regardless of performance. And regional rivals, particularly coastal states that profit from Burkina Faso's landlocked status, aren't thrilled about losing leverage. Every project Traore launches is a gamble that economic momentum can outpace security threats and political instability. So far, it's holding. But the margin for error is razor-thin. What no one expected was how quickly the model would resonate beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso's partners in the alliance of Sahel states, are taking notes. They're facing similar challenges: jihadist violence, youth unemployment, dependency on foreign powers. And they're watching Burkina Faso prove that sovereignty isn't about isolation. It's about building systems that serve your people first. It's about owning your supply chains, controlling your trade routes, and generating your own power. Literally and figuratively.